Hi, my name is Adam Stoughton. I'll be your instructor for AER220. And this is basically the introduction week, the first week in your study on the 10-week path to your instrument rating ground school. So I kind of want to start off with these videos each week just to ensure that you have a general idea of what the material is going to be for this week, as well as any tips or tricks I might have as students have struggled in the past on the material. I like to offer up some suggestions on the best way to approach it. In addition, I'd like to cover exactly what you're going to complete this week. So what I'm seeing this week is 5 ground lessons. That's 5 of the online ground school ground lessons. It's very important to get those. Then there are 2 chapter sections in the textbook. Now, kind of an aside, those chapters in the textbooks are reading that supplements the online ground school. So if you don't quite understand what the online ground school is talking about, a particular subject area, use that textbook, look in there in those sections, and you'll find out a little bit more. Maybe will help you in your pursuit. In addition to that, there'll be a discussion post. So this week's discussion post is going to be an NTSB report review. And it's going to deal with instrument issues and interpretation inside the aircraft, which is very appropriate to the material that you're going to cover this week. So I look forward to lively discussion posts on there, as well as information being exchanged in a respectful manner. So overall, the material in week 1 is going to cover basically the ins and outs of the instrument rating, different methods of getting it, as well as some of the responsibilities for an instrument rated pilot. On top of that, you're going to go a little bit into aeronautical decision making and then flight instruments and the actual usage of them. So when it comes to the first set of material, you need to understand when you need an instrument rating. I want you to take that away from the material. When do you need it? When do you not need it? That way you know how to exercise the discretion of when you need to file an IFR flight plan and when you don't. Also of note is that your safety level increases exponentially once you get an instrument rating. I'm happy that all programs, professional flight, require you to get an instrument rating because I think that you'll be using it for the rest of your life. And it's very important that you understand all the ins and outs of it. So as you get your instrument rating, you'll probably notice that you use an AATD. That's an Advanced Aviation Training Device. CAU uses them. We leverage them nicely prior to going out in the airplane and actually practicing instrument work. So expect to have an opportunity to fly in the Redbird because you'll be doing it quite often, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Finally, a few things I want you to take away from the material when it comes to the ins and outs of the instrument is IFR versus IMC. You want to kind of have an idea of what the differences between those two are when people mention it. On top of that, the instrument recency requirements. Now, you as an instrument rated pilot need to know when you're current and when you're not, so you know exactly when it's okay to fly in IMC under IFR. After that, you're going to move into aeronautical decision making, which will be a review of what you experienced in your private pilot certificate. You got to understand that IFR flying or an IMC poses more risks, and you have to learn the mental models that you need to use to mitigate these risks over the long term, and that's going to help you do that. Included in there are briefings. Now, this might not be something you're familiar with, but CAU has SOP, which requires that you do a departure safety briefing, which could be the takeoff briefing. You identify threats to the flight as how you're going to mitigate those. So it's important you to understand what those are. That chapter is going to help you out with that. And finally, automation management. This is something that you'll hear a lot from pilots and professional flight crews that are flying a high-end aircraft. The comment of, okay, what's it doing now? So this concept refers to the fact that sometimes if you don't understand the automation as much as you probably should, perhaps you set a setting in there, the airplane goes the opposite direction that you want it to, and it just increases risk as a result of that. So we'll discuss that a little bit more as we move through. And finally, you're going to look at the flight instruments and the actual mechanicals inside it. You do need to understand these because you got to understand what happens when they fail. So how they work is super important. Now, some students have issues with things like electrical theory. Electrical theory affects some of the instruments in the aircraft. It's very important you know the difference between a volt and an amp or an ohm. You'll probably want to take a look at review if you don't really know what that is, and I think the textbook probably would explain it. Finally, mag compass errors. There's a point at which you might not have the HSI or the heading indicator in your aircraft, and you could be turning the aircraft via mag compass. You have to understand the errors associated with doing that, and this is the best way to start, is to understand magnetic dip. Then finally, altitude types. When you get in the altimeter, it's going to go over some of the altitude types, and it's very important that you can verbalize the difference between a pressure altitude, a density altitude, or even indicated altitude. You should be able to decipher the differences between those. Pitot blockage. If your pitot tube has a blockage, how does it affect the safe outcome of the flight, and how does it affect your decision making to ensure there's a safe outcome to the flight? Finally, glass cockpits. So if you're flying in a vacuum-driven aircraft with vacuum instruments, then you might not think you're too concerned with primary flight displays and multifunction displays. But you should have some familiarity with them, because at some point in time in your professional aviation career, you will experience those, so you want to have good familiarity. So we look forward to engaging you on this week, and I'm excited to get this term underway. So feel free to contact me if you need. Thanks a lot.